To Vicky Pryce, the international economist and former joint head of the UK government's economic service. Welcome back to the programme, Vicky. So we talked last week about the ECB not having a clear view of the path ahead when it comes to interest rates and tackling inflation. Do these numbers give them something more to go on?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's a bit of a confusing picture. You have some countries doing reasonably well. You've mentioned the 0.3% increase in GDP in the second quarter, which was better than the previous quarter where there was stagnation. But within that, you have great variability. You have Germany not doing well, in fact, stagnating itself rather than growing. You have France actually doing surprisingly, better than had been anticipated, mainly on the back of exports, which is interesting in itself. And you've got Italy not really performing, also seeing, quite a slowdown in its own performance. And you have Spain doing okay, but I'm now focusing, of course, on the large economies, and Spain's growth moderating a little bit, but at least growing. But inflation is moving in the right direction, and it's moving in the right direction in almost all countries in Europe. So if you look at the fact that we're not seeing that much growth, yes, some countries are doing better than others, and the fact that inflation is indeed slowing down and may well slow down even further. Yes, there are some slight tweaks. So Spanish inflation came up a little bit from where it was, but it's still pretty low. It's just over 2%. So we can't complain too much. German inflation has come down. So on the basis of all this, you would wonder whether there is a real need for an increase in interest rates by the ECB when they meet next.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Germany, if we can. Obviously, the powerhouse economy of the EU, but stagnating, really. How much of a concern is its performance?
Well, it is worrying generally because you're quite right. It's a locomotive for growth for the rest of the EU. What it has, of course, seen is a drop in manufacturing demand. I mean, that's basically what has hit its own growth because it's so dependent on that. And if you look at manufacturing growth worldwide and manufacturing exports worldwide, there is an issue because the growth in the OECD, certainly in the advanced world, is being driven mainly by services and not by manufacturing. So obviously Germany suffers from this. Plus, of course, it has had to intervene to cut energy demand. So quite a lot of its energy-intensive industries have been suffering. You know that energy demand amazingly in Germany has dropped very significantly. So it's suffering from a combination of those factors. But there is an underlying strength still there. It has, a very firm industrial base, and the expectation is that what we're seeing right now will be short-lived.
Well, let's talk again about the Eurozone, because we saw that a headline inflation figure falling, but core inflation is the same. So is enough being done to tackle it?
The interesting thing about Europe is that the concerns that others have, such as the UK, is that wage growth is very substantial and therefore there is some built-in embedded inflation there for us to worry about. But the truth is, if you look at Europe, wages are not increasing particularly. I think this core inflation is something that needs to worry us, of course. But it isn't necessarily directly correlated with inflation. I mean, core inflation in Spain, for example, is considerably greater than what its overall inflation is. So there will be, I think, and there are already, signs that in itself is going to slow down. There is no real cost push as such, except in areas such as services, where demand is still very considerable in various countries and where prices are expected to continue to go up. But the rest, I think we're seeing from all the evidence that's out there that core inflation itself is perhaps not going to be such a big issue in the months ahead.
Vicky, great to get your thoughts today. Thank you for being on the programme. That's Vicky Pryce, the international economist.
Yeah.